welcome to the latest episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and I'm here to review all the latest films in theaters and streaming, as well as anything that you guys recommend, whether it be recent films or old school movies. Before we get to today's review, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel, so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on YouTube. And also don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Now today, we're going to be reviewing one of my most anticipated movies of 2019, and that is DC's Shazam. Now, for me personally, I got real excited about this movie on numerous parts. Mainly, the big one being that they casted Zachary Levi in the character role. Now, I am a huge fan of Zachary Levi. For anyone who has seen the TV show Chuck, if you guys watch that show, then you guys know exactly what I mean about how much I love Zachary Levi as a person and as an actor. The charm, the charisma, the heart that he brings into his roles are fantastic, and that boyish wonder that he brings into everything he does. I was super excited when they casted him in this role, because it was finally for me to see him as in his breakout role. I mean, yes, he was the voice of I'm blanking on the main guy's name in Tangled, but he was the main male voice in Tangled, and of course he also played one of the Warriors 3 in Thor 2, and I guess Thor 3 Ragnarok, if you want to count that as a role. So this is kind of his real big, kind of like out there in your face, big picture movie role outside of Chuck. And for anyone who hasn't seen the TV show Chuck, go out of your way to catch that show, because it is an amazing TV show. It's only 5 seasons long, but you will not be sorry if you watch that. But yeah, so I was I was really excited about Zachary Levi getting this opportunity. DC movies, I mean, they're kind of touch and go, but they're been getting stronger as they went on. I mean, you have Man of Steel, which I was actually pretty happy with Man of Steel. I thought it was a real solid film. And then obviously you have Batman vs. Superman, which I hated. And then you have Suicide Squad, which I also was not a fan of. But then Wonder Woman came out, and that was great. Justice League was fine, I guess. But then we started to get Aquaman, which, for what it was, I enjoyed. Obviously, there were situations, or there were parts in the film that they could have done better, but overall, I enjoyed quite a bit. And then the trailer for Shazam came out, and man, this movie looked awesome. It looked fun, not to mention funny lines out of Shazam, but the main thing coming out of this is that it was Tom Hanks' big, but a superhero film. And it is, in a big sense, but there's more to the film than just Tom Hanks' big, but a superhero film. And we'll get into that. But that's basically, I was really excited and really hopeful for this. And then, of course, word coming out of the reviewers, they got to see it a week or so back, was all incredibly positive. So my expectations were really high going into this. And I was really excited. And to find out that I was able to see this 2 weeks before its release, because it does not come out until April 5th, made me even more excited that I was able to catch this tonight in a special screening review. And a lot of people have got, this is worldwide, so it wasn't like I just got to see it over other people. So a lot of people got to see Shazam tonight. But the embargo to release the reviews also got released tonight, so that's why I'm doing the video now and posting it, instead of having to wait until the week of Shazam coming out. So let's dive into the review, and let's see what I thought about it. For most of the people who don't know who Shazam is, Shazam is basically a superhero in the DC world, where it's a wizard who finds this boy and basically embarks his powers onto this boy, so that way he can defend the world from the evils that attack it. And so basically you have a boy, or young teenager, young teenager, who is basically given the powers of basically a god. Basically anytime he utters the name Shazam, he grows into a full-fledged god, for the most part. And basically him having to adjust to that situation from going from just an average foster teenager to basically a superhero overnight, and then him having to kind of learn and grow and figure stuff out. And not to take a quote away from Spider-Man, but this movie is literally the epitome of with great power comes great responsibility. And the movie itself does a great job of not letting it just be about action all the time, because there's not a whole lot of action. There's about 2-3 fight scenes in the film, but it develops a actual story that we'll go into a little bit further. But yeah, that's the general plot without going too deep into the film. Is a boy basically is given the powers of a superhero by a wizard, and he must learn to use the powers to defend against the evil that's been released upon the world. And that's the plot in a nutshell for Shazam without going too deep into the actual movie itself. I think that's pretty much a good enough of a plot synopsis for you guys to kind of go into it. But yeah, so basically what worked in the film overall, and there'll be a little bit more plot stuff that I'll probably sprinkle into this as I'm going through. But the main thing, Zachary Levi is fantastic as Shazam. Or he doesn't ever really go by Shazam in the film. But he goes by like 100 superhero names. So I'm just gonna call him Adult, or I'll probably call him Shazam or Adult Billy Baston, because that is obviously the actual character's name in the film. Zachary Levi was born to play Shazam. He has, like I said earlier, he has that childlike wonder that he plays so brilliantly in this film. He is an actor that you actually are watching him, and you believe that he is a young adolescent kid in this role, and he's not just an adult pretending to be a child. He gives that childlike charm that makes you actually believe that the adult Billy version, or Shazam himself, is an actual child or an adult young teenager trapped in a superhero's body. His charm knows no bounds in this film. His ability to work with not only the villain in the film, Mark Strong, but most importantly, and the other highlight of the film, is his foster brother, Freddy, played by Jack Dylan Grazer, who many people might know from a couple years ago's It, who was amazing in that film. These two are easily the best parts of the film. Their chemistry and their story of friendship in this film is what makes this movie work overall. They make the movie fun, they make it enjoyable, and there's a lot of heart in the story too. And there's a great story element between those two, as well as when because the general base story, I could have probably gone over this a little bit better in the plot, is that Billy is he was a child who lost his mother at a fair or a carnival, and he never found his mother, and so basically he became a foster child, and he basically keeps running away from every foster house he's been in because he's still trying to find his mother, and he hasn't been able to find it. And after getting caught by the police, after doing some, trying to find the latest name in his list to try to find his mother, he gets put into this foster home where Freddy's character lives. Obviously it's a house with about I think 5 or 6 foster kids. I believe it's 5 foster kids, not counting Billy. And and then of course you have the 2 parents. But Freddy is the one that kind of opens up to him the most. And you basically, he's a big superhero geek. Freddy is. I mean, you could tell he's all about Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman. He's a huge DC fanboy. And he's just all about the superhero aspect, and to the point where he basically bugs young Billy, played by Asher Angel, bugs him to no end, to the point where you have this story in the film as well, based off not just obviously Billy getting these powers and becoming Shazam. You have this kind of this character with Freddy, and he's got a disability. He walks around with a walking crutch kind of thing. But you have this ability where you have a kid who's disabled who wants nothing more than to be a hero and to be noticed and to be that guy that everyone looks to be the hero. And then you have this guy who frankly just doesn't want it, who gets this power. And so you have that ability of where Freddy kind of has to go one of two ways. He can either be jealous of Billy and his new powers and resent him for it, or be excited and basically kind of be his mentor / teacher and teach him the ways of being a superhero. And that storyline is very evident in the film. It's very huge in the film itself, and that resentment kind of creeps in a little bit at certain points of the film as well. And Jack Dylan Grazer and Asher Angel / Zachary Levi, all three of them play it beautifully throughout the film. And like I said, that combination of those three are the highlight of the film. The other side of that certain storyline is with Asher Angel's younger Billy character, is that he has also that storyline of that foster kid trying to find his mother and him being abandoned as a young child, and that ability of never ever feeling wanted. And that's why he always runs away, because he knows he's on a mission to find his mother. And the superhero aspect, while yes, it's cool, it falls into the back seat of him trying to find his mother and him not ever fully kind of opening up to his brand new family. And so you have that dilemma, and Asher Angel does a fantastic job of playing that performance. And because of that, there's a lot of actual heartbreaking moments in the film itself that can actually bring some tears to the audience. There's one big scene in particular that I actually got a little bit misty-eyed watching it, which is a huge compliment to Asher Angel for being able to perform that and bringing out that emotion to anyone watching it, because it was a heartbreaking scene, and he does a fantastic job. And so you have that other story arc going into the film as well, on top of the other tons of story arcs going on in this movie. There's a lot of story arcs in Shazam, but they actually flow, for the most part, relatively well. There are some that don't work, but a lot of them actually flow pretty well. The other great aspect is also the actual foster family that lives in the same house with Freddy and Billy. They're all incredibly well done. And in a larger scale, the entire cast, for the most part, of Shazam do a fantastic job overall. There's not really a wink-link out of Mark Strong the villain, Levi, Grazer, Angel, or any of the Foster family. The parents, basically you have Cooper Andrews, who most people might know as Jerry from Walking Dead, who's I'm a huge fan of him in The Walking Dead. He does a great job playing Victor Vasquez. He's basically the father, the foster father. And you also have Marta Milans. She plays Rosa, who's his wife. Both of them bring a great dynamic duo of a foster family who's just, they play such great parents, and Billy's just not willing to accept them, obviously, because his mindset is finding his mother, but they do a great job. And then you also have the other children who live in the foster house as with Freddy and Billy, such as you have Grace Fulton, who plays Mary. She's the oldest of the group, and she actually is one of the highlights of the film as well. She actually does a really, really good job of kind of being the secondary adult to the kids outside of the parents. The biggest highlight of the children definitely goes to Faith Herman, who plays Darla. She's the youngest sister of the group, and anyone who watches This Is Us will know her from there, because she plays one of the children to Sterling K. Brown's character in the show, and she just captures your heart in the first sentence of the film. Her first lines, she just grabs a hold of you, and she does that in everything she's in. Everything I've seen her in, including This Is Us, she is just one of those little girls that just will melt your heart with her adorableness, and she does it amazingly in this film throughout the entire movie. And then you also have Ian Chen, who plays Eugene, and Yovan Armand, who plays Pedro. they don't really have a whole lot to do in the movie, but when they do get their chances to shine, they are actually very fun characters overall. But the main cast of the foster carers, you actually have like I said, the parents of Victor and Rosa, and then you got Mary, Darla, Freddie, and then obviously Billy being kind of the main cast overall outside of the villain. Like I said, all of them bring all of them bring a lot of heart and humor to the movie, and it just shows a positive view also of the foster home and the family dynamic overall, just kind of like it did with last year's Instant Family, that it shows that sometimes the foster care system actually does work in a positive way and works in a very well oriented way in terms of taking foster kids who are usually always kind of perceived as asshole jerks or troubled kids, where in this light, they're actually all really good kids and adapt to the situation. I mean, not Billy so much, but all of the others adapt very well overall. And it's nice to see that for a change. That and Instant Family do a real good job of putting foster care in a positive light, which we don't ever really see in movies pasts. Of course, you also have Mark Strong, who plays the villain. Now, I'm a huge fan of Mark Strong. A lot of people probably know him more for his hero roles of Kingsman, which he was fantastic in there. But I personally love Mark Strong as a villain character. He has done a lot of villain roles. He was Sinestro in Green Lantern, but he was kind of more of an ally turned villain by the end of the movie. In that, he was in Kick-Ass. He was also the villain in the first Sherlock film. He was basically my number one villain actor, and then he turned kind of hero with the Kingsman, and then Ben Mendelsohn kind of took over the villain role for me for top villain actor. But yeah, Mark Strong does great, and the great thing about Mark Strong's villain in the movie, he goes by Thaddeus Savani, is that kind of like with Magneto and X-Men, they give him an actual origin story that is actually kind of heartfelt to the point where you kind of see where he's coming from, and you understand him to a point where, yes, he is a villain, he is a bad guy, but you kind of feel for him in a way that adds layers to his villain character overall. The only negative I really have towards Mark Strong's character, it has nothing to do with him, because he does a great job acting the role and doing a good job, because he always does as a villain, is that I kind of wish I would have gotten at least one more scene of him alone and not fighting Shazam, just to kind of make his character just a tiny bit stronger. It's already a strong villain character as well, but I just felt like one more actual scene about his actual personal character's life and dynamic really could have solidified it and just made it a little bit more stronger. But he does a great job with what he's given. I just kind of wish there was at least one more scene of him that we really could have let Mark Strong kind of dig into his character a little bit further. There's also dark horror aspects in the film as well, which were really cool and a nice change of pace. I mean, I know DC movies are naturally dark in their own right, and just like with Aquaman, it's a very dark film, and then they get to the trench, and it's kind of very horror aspect type of film for that small part, and Shazam has that aspect too, and it's a nice surprise to the film overall. But people who are adults bringing their children to the film might want to be wary for at least one particular scene. It's kind of in the first half of the film where the actual audience was shocked when this scene aired. But yeah, I mean, it does have some dark horror type of elements. I think they work well for the most part. I'll touch on it a little bit later in what doesn't work, because there's one aspect of it that I felt like needed to happen to just give it a little bit more of a oomph. But it's a nice surprise and a nice flowing change of pace to the tone of the film, because you have your light, fun, buddy, coming of age horror or superhero story, but then you add that dark kind of horror aspect to it as well, just to give it a little bit more of an oomph to it. It doesn't overshadow the film or overtake the film by any means, but it is a nice little change of pace in the film as it's going on. The other thing too is that there are a ton of Easter eggs in the movie, mainly DC related. One that I personally love, and this isn't like a spoiler or anything, is that for anyone who watched Smallville, which was the TV series based on Young Superman, a lot of people are going to love the nice little Easter egg shout out to John Oliver, or who plays Mark Strong's father in the film. He obviously played Lionel Luthor, Lex Luthor's father in the Smallville. So it was nice seeing him pop up, obviously in a DC movie, because it was kind of a nice tip of the hat that they're keeping the DC stuff in the DC family. Obviously, there's Easter eggs to Tom Hanks's Big as well, which I thought was quite funny when it popped up, and a nice kind of a movie that's well aware of the movie that they are filming and the movie that they're showing us, that they were willing to kind of go, we get it, you guys think this is a superhero version of Big, so we're going to give you a Big scene just to kind of make it funny, and I liked that tip of the hat, kind of almost Deadpool-ish, where it's very aware of the movie that it is, and it's not afraid to shy away from it or poke fun at itself at its own expense to get a laugh from the audience. And then there's a ton of DC merch in the movie, which can also kind of come off as a negative as well, because it kind of makes you kind of confused at where we are at in terms of the DC world, because Batman in the DC verse right now was kind of labeled as a villain in BVS. And here they've got tons of toys and memorabilia, and then Superman's got his memorabilia and toys, and so does Wonder Woman. Aquaman's got t-shirts in the film, so it's kind of confusing on where we're at focally in the DC world based on the other films. But it's not something that is a I mean, it is an eyesore, because there's times where they are overshadowing the merch with the Justice League characters outside of Cyborg. He doesn't really get anything, and I don't think there's really anything for Flash. But it doesn't like take away from the story itself, but it is something that's funny, but also kind of where are we at in terms of the DC storyline, to the point where that these three heroes, or four heroes, being Aquaman, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, are in the limelight enough to the point that they actually have toys, t-shirts, and memorabilia merchandise that people can actually purchase and basically kind of celebrate. So it's a little weird in that, but it's also kind of funny and enjoyable in a small sense. But yeah, and then also, there are 2 post-credit scenes for anyone who wants to know. In typical Marvel fashion, DC has one right after the graphics of the graphics credits, and what I mean by that is like where it has the artsy like visual credits where it goes over the main cast. There's a post-credit scene that definitely leads to a sequel, and then they have one at the very, very end of the credits that is kind of like your typical Marvel post-credit scene where it's a joke. It doesn't necessarily bring anything to the actual storyline, no, but is it an enjoyable laugh to end the film on a high note? Yes, it is. So there are 2 post-credit scenes, so if you guys want to stay till the end of the film, you guys won't be disappointed, because it is a very enjoyable comedic post-credit scene at the end of the actual credits. Now, what does not work with the movie, and could this be nitpicking on my part? Yes. But these are the things that I noticed right off the bat where that just either didn't work for me, or I wish they would have either delved more into or pulled back on. While I did praise the horror aspects of the film, because they're without going who they are, there are creatures in the film that help Thaddeus Savani's villain character in the role. But based on who they actually are in the film, and I'm not going to say who they are based on spoilers, I just don't think they were properly used well in the film. If they just would have just been basic creatures, then they would have been used properly. But because of who these creatures actually are in the film, I felt like they should have been used in a way bigger role, used in a way bigger way, and could have actually been used in different formats of the film to make it kind of more of a threat. I mean, they visually look scary and horrifying for children and anyone in the actual film itself, but based on who these characters are actually portraying, they just could have gone about it a very different and better way than what they did in the film alone, and I feel like that was an actual weak spot in the movie. Like I said, if they had gone with just them being normal creatures and not who they're actually portraying, then they would have been used perfectly fine, but because of who they were, I felt like that actually ended up being a weakness overall, because they were not utilized to the potential of who they are being portrayed as to the extent that they should have used in the film, if that makes any sense at all. And And like I said, Mark Strong should have had at least one more scene to just make his character a little bit more stronger, or him and the creatures that are in the film a little bit more stronger. For anyone who, obviously being a superhero movie, a lot of people just want to dive right into the superhero aspect of the film. I will say the first 30 minutes of the movie can come off slow for some people because it doesn't really jump into the superhero story probably until after the 30-minute mark, meaning Shazam does not pop up, or Zachary Levi's version of Shazam does not pop up until around the 30-minute mark. So for people who are really just wanting to jump into the Zachary Levi aspect of the film, you might consider the first 30 minutes to be a little slow. I thought it was fine because they're really establishing the young cast, such as, Asher Angel's young Billy Batson, and of course, Jack Glazer's Freddy character, and of course the Foster family, and Mark Strong's Thaddeus Savani. So the first 30 minutes might be considered slow for some people, but it is character building, so I was okay with it. But some people might be a little kind of annoyed by how long it takes for the actual adult Billy Batson Shazam to show up. The school scenes in the movie also didn't really work for me at all. They never really reached that level that we got in Spider-Man Homecoming, where the school scenes were actually enjoyable and fun to watch. These ones, they're not fun. They're rather dry. They're trying to go for a certain thing, and I just don't think they work at all, to the point where I feel like they could have just done without them for the movie. I felt like they were more of a weakness for the film, and they didn't do anything to make the characters stronger in the film overall. So the school scenes to me just failed very badly in the film overall, which also ties into the bullies in the film. The bullies get away with doing something in the beginning of the movie that is very, very huge and criminal. And they seem to get away with it, even though there were tons of witnesses to what they did. And they seem to get really no repercussions for what they did in that first aspect. And it seemed very wrong and very off to that what they did at the beginning. And the latter half of that is shown in the trailer, which is what they do to the Freddy character. But the actual first initial part of that, they should have been either expelled or arrested. And nothing happens to them in that at all, which just seemed off and wrong. And even when they actually do get their comeuppance, in terms of when Billy actually becomes Shazam, even that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because what they end up doing to the bullies doesn't flow with the story, because what adult Billy / Shazam does to the bullies in that part, he hasn't kind of learned how to do that yet as a character. So how's he doing it at that point? The story kind of feels out of order at that point, because, and I think you guys will understand it when you actually watch it, is he does something to the bullies in the movie where I'm like, how's he doing this? Because he doesn't know how to do this certain thing yet. And you guys will understand it when you see the movie, but the whole bully storyline just did not work. It was not needed. As well as the entire school aspect as well. Now, the horror aspect, I said I would come back to it, as while I thought the horror aspect of the film was cool, but the problem is that it wasn't utilized properly, as there are some very vicious deaths in this movie, especially in this one particular scene that I kind of mentioned earlier. And the reason why it didn't work as well as it could have was because there's no blood. And yeah, I don't need a ton of gore or anything, mind you, but based off of the viciousness of these deaths that happen in the movie in this particular scene, and the scene as a whole, to not have a single drop of blood happen in this film, or in this actual scene, just felt weird. And you could tell that they really just couldn't fully go for it all the way, because they're trying to keep it in a PG-13 role. But to not have any blood at all, it really just kind of made the scene feel weird, because they just didn't really go for it all the way. And it's like, it's one of those points where it's like, if you can't go all the way with it and show blood in this particular part, then why do it at all? I get you're wanting a horror scene, I get you're kind of wanting a scene that's going to make these creatures scary, or the villain himself scary, but if you can't go to the full extent of what you were wanting to go with it, then go about it a different way. Because this scene desperately needed to have some blood in the scene based off of what we were visually seeing, and to not have a single drop of blood just looked weird, and it stood out. In fact, there's only 2 shots of blood in the movie itself, and one's like a bloody nose and the other one's like a scratch. And even then, it's just like, with what we were watching and the fight scenes and the attacks themselves, there should have been at least bruises or cut foreheads or scrapes should have been shown, but for some reason they kept the blood completely dry in the movie. Obviously, because I guess they didn't want to go a little bit too hard on the ratings, but it was PG-13, and I've seen a lot more crazier things happen in a PG-13 film. I think it's more or less because they want to keep the film as child-friendly as possible, but the creatures themselves are horrifying, so it kind of contradicts what they're trying to do. I know that was kind of a big ramble. I hope you guys kind of understand what I was talking about with that. And once you guys see the movie, you will definitely know what I'm talking about. Also, the final battle, it was cool. And the twist aspect of it, I actually really, really enjoyed. The problem is that the final battle just kind of ran too long. And it drags a little bit. Not to say that it wasn't enjoyable. It's just, at one point, you're like, okay, let's wrap this up. I'm just kind of seeing repetitive stuff at this point, and we just kind of need to let's go. Let's wrap this up or bring something new to the battle, which we're not getting. It was still an enjoyable battle. Like I said, that's a nitpick at that point. The final battle felt a little too long. It's obviously not like Avengers Battle of New York long by any means, but with that there was different aspects and new things popping up and stuff like that kept that battle exciting the entire way through. This one, they start with something new as soon as the battle starts, but it then starts to just kind of just repeat what it's doing, and it kind of just drags a little too long. They probably could have cut about 1 to 5 minutes off of it to kind of just make it a little more tight and to keep the movie just going a little bit more briskly. And like I said earlier, the DC merch kind of makes it a little bit confusing where we're at in terms of the DC universe at this point, because like I said, I don't know where we're at in terms of where Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Batman, and Superman would have merchandise. So it was kind of confusing, at least for me, by the end of the film. Not confusing, but just kind of like, okay, where are we in terms of the DC world? That might not necessarily bother a lot of people, but by the end of the film, it was kind of just like, where the hell are we right now? But the very, very end of the film, I actually really enjoyed the little thing they added to it. Can't really talk about it, but yeah. But that's it. A lot of that stuff is just generally nitpicking and just stuff that I saw that I didn't like. But overall, even with the stuff that I didn't have a problem with, I still really, really liked this movie. I had a ton of fun watching it. I laughed quite a bit because of obviously Zachary Levi and Jack Grazer. I know I keep forgetting his second name. Dylan, thank you, Jack Dylan Grazer. I really, really enjoyed their back and forth chemistry. Like I said, Zachary Levi is a fantastic Shazam. I could not picture anyone else in that role. I can't wait to see more from this character. I cannot wait for the sequels when we get them. Had a ton of fun watching the film. Highly recommend it, obviously. And it's an enjoyable film overall. It's not a perfect film, mind you. Clearly, as you see in what I stated in What Does Not Work. But it is a fun film overall. Because of what doesn't work, we go into the top 10 movies of 2019 so far. It does not quite hit the number 1 spot. That still goes to Jordan Peele's Us that came out this weekend, with Shazam Shazam coming in at the number 2 spot, which moves Fighting With My Family down to the number 3, followed by Captain Marvel, then How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, then we got Lego Movie 2, the second part, followed by Happy Death Day 2, then Alita Battle Angel, then The Upside, and rounding out the top 10 is Glass, with Escape Room dropping out of the top 10. But that's basically all I got for you here. I hope you guys liked the review, and if you did, go ahead and hit that like button. If you felt like this review was worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. But most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to the channel so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on YouTube. And also don't forget to follow us at all the social media outlets you see below. And until next time, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.